So it was 1984, in the spring of 1984, when I got kicked out of the Jimmy Carter Library and my entire class with me. Now let me tell you what happened. It was part of our Georgia History Studies class, right, that middle school age. And we were doing the Jimmy Carter Library tour as part of our exploration of Georgia history. And so as we were getting ready to leave school that morning, the principal who was going with us and our teachers all gathered us in together. And as they usually do when you're doing a school field trip, they laid down the rules. Don't do this, don't do that. But one of the things they reminded us was, you are representing our school. And so as we go on this field trip, remember that you are representing Fayette Christian School. So don't do anything stupid. Yeah, so we're a bunch of middle schoolers. We go to the Jimmy Carter Library. And if you're an adult and you go to the Jimmy Carter Library, it's probably fascinating. But we walk, it's a museum, right? And I found a place that captured my attention. And there was a television, because apparently President Carter was represented in a cartoon at some point years ago as a character in a cartoon. And that cartoon was playing. And I was like, this has my attention. But you couldn't hear it because the volume was turned down. But the little facade, the little marker that was over the television, there was enough space that if you reached your finger back there, you could hit the volume control buttons and you could turn it up a little bit. So I'm standing there and I reach back and I turn the volume up to where you could hear it. And as I leaned back, I had a tap on my shoulder. As I looked around, there was this very tall, probably 9 foot tall security guard that says, "Come with me." Well, we all got to leave the Jimmy Carter Library early that day because I did not heed the warning of our principal of don't do something that does not reflect well on our school. So our principal went back and talked to the head of security, and we all came out and they're like, all right, guys, we're going to leave. So we all left a little early. I tell you that story because today Paul is going to give us one of those warnings. Paul in our text today is going to give us one of those, hey, as you go about your life, remember who you reflect. So we want to look at that this morning as we continue our study of Philippians. Last week, Pastor Ricky shared with us sort of this idea that Paul has, for me to live as Christ and to die as gain. And we looked at this idea that Paul desires to serve Jesus just as much as we want to see Jesus. And we were challenged to live our life in a way that said, I really want to see Jesus really bad, but I'm going to wait till he calls me home. And so today I'm going to live my life in a way as equally as much as I want to see Jesus, I'm going to serve him well. And Paul was very keenly aware that to live as Christ, but to die as gain. But his mission, his purpose was to serve Jesus. His desire was to see the church at Philippi continue in the progress that he had left them with in joy of the faith. And so he wanted to encourage them to continue what he had taught them and to live out what he expected of them in a way that was consistent with the gospel. And so he invited them to live this out with a challenge. And that's kind of what our text is going to be looking at today. We're in Philippians chapter 1. We're going to look at verses 27 and 28 today. And Paul is going to invite the Philippians to live in a way that is consistent with the gospel as they live out this challenge. So Philippians chapter 1, verse 27. Only let your manner of life be worthy of the gospel of Christ, so that whether I come and see you or am absent, I may hear of you that you are standing firm in one spirit, with one mind, striving side by side for the faith of the gospel, And not frightened in anything by your opponents. This is a clear sign to them of their destruction, but of your salvation, and that from God. Only is an interesting word to start this passage with, because it communicates the idea. The first point I want us to look at today is that it is above all and at all cost. When Paul begins this statement with only, what he's trying to help understand is that of everything I could tell you, of everything I want you to know, I want you to know this thing. Only this thing is important. What I'm about to tell you. Only, right? This is the idea of it is an exhortation that is all-encompassing. There is no aspect or attribute of our life, there is no part of what Paul might be trying to communicate that is exempt from this. It is an all-encompassing charge to us. Only, and then he follows. Paul is going to completely encapsulate for us what it is to live out the whole gospel. And he doesn't want us to miss it. So he says, only this. It's the single most important message that he wants to share. And it encapsulates the entirety of the gospel, lived out in your life, expressed in your day-to-day, and it is vital that we get it. So if I only have one message, Paul is saying, this is the thing I want you to hear me say. Whether I'm with you or not, maybe I'll hear the rumors of it down the road, but only this. Okay? So it's important. What Paul is about to share with us is an important idea for us to grasp and to hold on to, and to direct and motivate and impact the way we live out our life every day. So it's important. So let's break it apart, this first statement, verse 27. Let's break it apart. Let's digest it. Let's figure out what he is trying to get us to understand, so that as we leave here today, we can do the only thing, above all and of most importance. So the first thing he says is, let your manner of life. He's called us to be a citizen. Now this is an interesting, the word that's here that Paul would have wrote down, it's a word that doesn't translate easily into English. There's not like a direct correlation. And so you kind of have to put a phrase to it as opposed to just a word-for-word thing. It actually has the stem of the word is where we get the word politics from. It's where we get the idea of metropolitan, the polis. It's the idea of where we get city from. It carries with it this notion of citizenship, but it's not just that you're a citizen blank, it's that you're a very specific kind of citizen that has a very specific type of life, and it's reflected in how you live. Walk as a citizen. Let your manner of life, right? But it's not just how you live, it's defined by some type of citizenship. Now, Paul only uses this word in the book of Philippians, which is interesting because why wouldn't he use it in Ephesians or Corinthians, right? Philippians. Why does he choose this particular word? Because it's used twice in the book of Philippians, but it's not used in any other of Paul's writings. Well, the Philippians were very proud of the fact that they were Roman citizens. They're a unique territory in the Roman Empire. There's some history there. I'm not going to go through the history, but there were some battles won, and Philippi kind of played a role in some of these things, and they were kind of given a very high status within the Roman Empire. They were kind of given a Julius Caesar sort of tag in terms of their identity. They were the colony of Julius Augustus of Philippi. Right? I mean, the Philippi came from, they have a high standard or status amongst the Roman Empire. They're not Italian, but they're treated like they're a city in Italy. So like all of the cities, all of the territories that were in the Roman Empire, they were taxed a particular way. They had Roman soldiers in the cities and in those towns that were set up and governing them in a particular way. They were obvious foreigners in a Roman territory. Philippi was not that way. Philippi was proud of the fact that they were Roman citizens. They weren't taxed the way the rest of the empire was. They had certain rights and privileges by being a higher standard, a higher clout Roman colony than all the other colonies. They were kind of elevated. It was almost as if you took a piece of Italy, picked it up out of Italy, and dropped it in Asia Minor, and you had a little bit of Italy with Rome experience. Like this was a city and a people that embraced the fact that they were Roman citizens. They were a micro-Rome in this distant territory of the empire. And they embraced it. They lived it. It was part of their identity. It was this little piece of Italian soil in an outcropping location of this vast empire. I've tried to, in my brain, I put it this way. It's kind of like Puerto Rico. They're not an American state, but they get all the rights and privileges. They get to vote. They have representatives. They get all of the perks, right, if you will. This was Philippi. They weren't a Roman city. They were occupied territory, but they had a certain level of clout. They lived like Romans. They operated like Romans. They were citizens of Rome in a far-off territory who lived as if they were in Rome. They were citizens of a far-off land, living like citizens of that land. They were living this way of life people. They were citizens of Rome. And they acted like they were citizens of Rome. It's the best way to connect this word to English is to think of citizenship. You know, you take classes of citizenship and you kind of understand the Constitution, you understand what your opportunities and what your rights and privileges are, the expectation of how you're going to live as a citizen. And so this word plays with it, this notion of citizenship, of being in a foreign area, yet identifying as this Roman citizen. And what Paul is wanting us to understand, what Paul is leveraging as he's talking to the people of Philippi, he's leveraging this identity that they have. You know how you think of yourselves as a Roman citizen in this empire territory of Philippi? You know how you think that way? That's how you should think about your life with Christ. This is what Paul is wanting them to understand. That manner of life that you live as a Roman citizen, not in Rome, but in a foreign territory, and yet you live like you're in Rome. You act like you're in Rome. You operate, you dress, you have a culture that feels like it's Rome, but it's not Rome. You know that manner of life that you have? Paul is leveraging this idea of the people of Philippi to help them understand what he is expecting them to live as followers of Jesus. This manner of life is a way to say, you are a citizen of heaven. You're living on this earth, but your citizenship is in another place. Your identity is in another place. And I know you're here. And I know this is not your home. I know this is not where you want to be. Paul says, I would rather for me to live as Christ, but to die is gain. I understand this is not the homeland, but I want you to understand that you are a citizen of heaven living in this world. And I want you to live a manner of life that reflects your citizenship, not the territory that you're living in. This is what Paul is trying to help them understand. I want you to understand that you are part of the kingdom of heaven. When Jesus came and he walked, one of his first messages he preached in Mark, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. The kingdom of heaven. And as Jesus would walk through the land, he, being God's dwelling place, the tabernacle among us, right? He was taking pieces of heaven with him everywhere he went. And he was imparting heaven on earth everywhere he went. And he has called us as citizens of heaven to carry pieces of heaven everywhere we go. Walk in a manner that is worthy of the calling. We have the rights and privileges that go along with citizenship. And what we are to do is to bring our life into conformity with our true homeland. Don't be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is the will of God. Be transformed. What Paul is trying to say with this language, this manner of life, is he is saying that we are to live our life in a way that is a life that has been conformed to the citizenship that we have in heaven, that we live it here on earth. So the people we interact with, we're going to bring a little bit of heaven with us. We're going to engage with people with a heaven citizenship, not a worldly citizenship. Let this manner of life be in you, is what Paul is saying. And he's leveraging the Philippians' pride of Roman citizenry to us as heaven citizens. This world